Welcome to the business of being healthy, where we are passionate about treating our health as good as we treat our wealth. Shelly Bryan here, and I am obsessed with sharing real-life experiences and wisdom to help save you time, heartache, and money as you continue to grow personally and professionally. Twice a week, we push aside that BS to take massive intentional action. And I promise by tuning in, you will receive the straightforward talk you've been waiting for, filled with actionable steps that will inspire you to achieve the health and wealth you desire while you are building your empire. Welcome back to another episode of the Business of Being Healthy show. Shelly Bryan here, and today's topic is one that's really actually pretty personal, and I'm going to share some of that with you guys. But the episode itself spurred from an interview that I had with a recent guest, Felicia Romero. I absolutely recommend that you guys go back, listen to that one. And we spoke a lot about pivoting and sharing numerous examples throughout our lives where we had to pivot based on our business and where we saw ourselves in the future. Now, about a week ago, I actually did a poll on my Instagram stories asking if anyone else has been in a season of pivot, and literally it blew up. Not one person replied no. Everyone replied yes. And so that's why I knew it was important to put together an exclusive episode for our community completely tied to pivoting. So here we are today. Now, have you ever thought about making a change or a pivot in your career, yet you held back for one reason or another? I know I have, probably more times than I'd like to admit. And my goal today is to share how my pivots have been able to get me to not only where I am right now, but in the future. And so my hope is that it inspires you to either take that pivot, make that change, or create a renewed commitment to your current growth in your current position in your career. Now, of course, you know me. I'm going to leave you with a few tips and some questions to really help guide you along the way. And I'll share those at the end. So you'll be sure to stick by at the end. Now, it's pretty funny because whenever you hear the word pivot, I kind of started cringing after 2020. Anybody else? Because I think it was overused quite a bit. Really kind of because we had no choice, right? And a lot of times when there isn't a choice is when a lot of innovation happens because we get pushed into it. Now, it's funny because I also know that I have some resistance when it comes to pivoting, based really on the stories that I've told myself and how I was raised. I know that a lot of it, I'm very sensitive in raising our kids right now because there are stories that I had believed because that's how I was raised. And now that I'm older, I'm able to question those and really find out whether it is a story or a truth. Now, I come from that era of like, go to school, get that degree, go work for someone else, climbing that corporate ladder to create your worth. Definitely not wealth. Occasionally you can create wealth. So I don't want to completely, say working for someone else is bad because I actually wouldn't be where I am if I hadn't worked for someone else. So I think that's an important part of everybody's journey. And if you continue on with that career path of working for someone else, fantastic. But today's episode is going to help give you a little bit renewed commitment to that. And or if you are ready to make a pivot and potentially do something different in your career, my hope is that this episode will help spur you. I keep using like horse analogies. That's going to keep coming, but spur you into making that change. So after graduating college, I went, like I said, straight to working for someone else. Now, again, I'm not here to say whether what you're doing is bad or wrong or good or right. What I'm here to do is to share how actually pivoting in your career could be the biggest blessing in disguise. So those 18 years that I was working in corporate America served me so well that I could be in the position where I am now. Without them, I don't believe that it honestly would have been possible. That being said, and really like reflecting back, I can see that there were opportunities where maybe I could have pivoted earlier. I'm not saying, sitting here in regret. I'm saying this from a position of strength. I'm a big believer that if we do take a few moments and actually reflect back on previous experiences, it's good to see where those opportunities lie because they're most likely going to come again. History does repeat itself. And while we hope we don't make the same mistakes or choices again, sometimes we do. But the good news is that now we can pivot or change or come out of that change in a much more position of strength and speed. Felicia actually shared in this episode that one of the things that separates the most successful people from others is their ability to make decisions quick. And I'm a strong believer that those quick decisions can only be made once you either have the knowledge or the experience. And life gives you a ton of experience that we can leverage towards the future you want to create. So let's dive in. And I want to share my business or professional pivots that I've made over the last, 21 years and what I've learned to my most recent pivot that I just made a few weeks ago. That's the cool thing about this, guys, is we don't stop. But God, it just keeps getting better because you learn from those past experiences. So like I shared, if you have been following along in all the episodes, coming out of college, I went to become a financial advisor. And I'd spent almost 3 years there before transitioning and pivoting over to pharmaceutical sales. So while I was in pharmaceutical sales, that's pivot number 1 right there, financial advisor to pharmaceuticals. Pivot 2 is I was at pharmaceutical company and I started getting a little stagnant in my job. Now, keep in mind, many pivots within that job is I was climbing up to like different levels, like becoming a trainer or management in training or marketing. Like I was learning all along the way. So you could call those small pivots. I'm talking about these big pivots. And about, I want to say 8 years into it, in the pharmaceutical company, I just was starting to get a little stagnant. And so I thought, why not start another company while I'm still working? So that's pivot number 2 is I still had my, 9 to 5, and then I started my side hustle. So I consider that a pivot as well. Then at about year 13 with the first pharmaceutical company, I had actually decided and was recruited away to another pharmaceutical company. That's another pivot because it was an entirely different position. All the while, I still have my business. So keep in mind, I'm working my 9 to 5, and I am still running another business on the side. And that pivot was a tough one. Gosh, I think I could do an entire episode on that one alone because the second company that I went for threw a lot of money at me and I went for it, and wow, the culture was bad. So what a learning experience that was, because once I left that company, I decided to buy into a franchise and opened up a franchised restaurant where I was running my own team. And I don't think that my team could have run as efficiently had I not had that actual horrible experience with culture at that second pharmaceutical company. So I knew what I didn't want to create with my team for my franchised company. So if you're counting along, that's pivot number 4. And then with the franchise company, I actually around just before the pandemic, we had to shut that one down. That's again, another whole story. There was some fraud from the franchisor and I had to shut that one down. But I had still had my business all along that I started with my first pharmaceutical company. And I transitioned that with a partner into a media company. And this was an equine media company. So there was another transition. So while I was running that equine media company, I was being just called, I knew it, being called to coach other women other high achieving professional women to help integrate their health back into their busy lives, most of them being moms as well. So while I was running the media company, I also began coaching, and that's something that has been near and dear to my heart. And learned so much because I also hired a coach at that time too. And so that's pivot number 6. Again, if you're following along, now pivot number 7 is coaching to now where I am with the Business of Being Healthy podcast. So podcasting, and I am taking a more prominent role within Chris and I's contracting company. So Chris runs a very successful, very busy general contracting firm here in Scottsdale. And now with a lot of my skills that I've gained over all these pivots, I am going to be taking a prominent role in that as well. I've been behind the scenes, but now I'm going to be a little bit more forward facing. So basically, if you were following along, in that span of 21 years, I had 7 kind of major pivots, right? As you know, you're doing the job or running the business, you have kind of pivots all the time, but these were pretty kind of drastic, life-altering pivots that I took in my career. Now, it's so funny because I'm like trying to put these together into one because I feel like it could go on, but these were the 7 biggest. And even as I'm recording this right now and thinking about all those years and all those pivots, is that there was one thing that was kind of consistent when I was making those pivots. And that was I was holding on to fear. Some of those pivots took a little bit longer to not only make the decision, but take the action because I had fear. I had fear of being able to provide for my family. I had fear of letting down my family because, again, this is kind of not what I was told to do, right? Climb that corporate ladder, work for someone else. I had a fear of starting over, and that, quite honestly, I was a fear of too old to be able to make these changes right now. I had too many responsibilities, right? Kids. If you follow me on social, I got lots of horses to feed, all these things. And I had a fear of what other people would think of me. I mean, who doesn't have that imposter syndrome? But I didn't realize how much it was inhibiting my ability to take action. And probably the most recent pivot that I shared was losing myself. And it was really based on ego. There was a lot of ego in there. And so being able to work through that has been able to help me navigate what is my future. And again, I'm sharing this. It's definitely not a horn tooting moment. It's like, I want you to see, like, you're not alone. Like, making these pivots and going through different changes are what we have to do. Reflecting on it to see, like, wow, what's holding me back? I had a lot of fears, and I needed to understand those fears so that I could see whether these were truths or whether these were stories that I was telling myself or something that I am basing an experience on that maybe wasn't mine, like how I was raised. Now, I can also look back at these pivots and I can see how some of these pivots yielded the most amazing experiences, both financially fruitful and exponentially on my professional and personal growth. Some were not financially fruitful. I call those my very expensive extensive college education that I had to go through. And I want to bring it back real quick to that word pivot in 2020, because I think it's one thing that we can all appreciate is that innovation that came from that year because of pivoting. Sometimes when we have no choice, it's when the greatest learning opportunities present themselves and we get to pivot. Notice that I didn't say we have to pivot. We actually get to pivot. Being put in those uncomfortable situations are when some of the best innovations can come, whether it's you personally, or you can even look at the way we are doing business now. Now, again, the purpose of me sharing all my pivots was to hopefully let you know that you're not alone. Pivoting isn't a bad thing. Yes, for sure, it can bring up a lot of fears as I shared mine, but those fears are often because of an unknown. And if we look past our fears, or if we find the knowledge that we need to be able to make these decisions quicker and with some finesse, then we can look to these pivots as opportunities to grow into our next best self professionally. Now, originally, I was going to take this episode honestly another way because I think there could be maybe a spinoff or another series on this. But I want to bring it back to an opportunity that I had last year. And that was to hear Jamie Kern Lima speak at Kacia Ghetmeri's EmpowerHER event last year. And Jamie was a surprise keynote speaker. It was such a neat thing. I highly recommend that you follow both Kacia as well as Jamie. I'll link them in the notes so that you can follow them on social media. And of course, reading Jamie's book. She is the founder of IT Cosmetics and has an incredible story, which was filled with pivots in her business. Now, I mean, and even in her career, now that I think about it. Now, you can easily say that she's a pivot expert, and it paid off not only by building a billion-dollar business, but also unimaginable confidence and business experience. Jamie couldn't be where she is right now without all those pivots. So those pivots, while we can get scared of them sometimes and maybe not want to do them, but there is such greatness that comes when we do take them. Now, during this event where I got to hear Jamie, she shared 5 key questions, which I'm wanting to share with you today because these are questions that could help you navigate your current and into your future, right? They can help you make that pivot. There's one question in particular that I used in my most recent pivot, and I'll share that at the end, that it really hit home with me. So let's dive in. Now, don't worry. I'm going to make sure that I put these in the show notes, and of course, giving all the credit to Jamie. These are not my questions, but I think it's important enough that I share them with you here on today's episode. In fact, if this episode hit you in a way that maybe you're going through a pivot and these questions help you, I'd love for you to snap a picture of this episode on whatever you're listening on and share it on social media. Tag me, tag Jamie. I want to know, not only do I want to give her the credit, but I want her to know the impact that she continues to have on so many lives. Now, if you've been following along, you know that this podcast is all about sharing wisdom, right? To save you time, heartache, and or money. And I was fortunate enough to hear Jamie, so I want to share these with you now. So number 1, what is one way that I'm hiding in my life right now? Number 2, what has hiding in plain sight or my self-doubt already cost me? Or like when I shared earlier about my fears on what held me back from making my pivots quicker. Now, number 3, imagine your life 5 years from now. If you keep hiding or not making that pivot, then what will it cost you? Number 4, imagine 10 years from now. If you're sitting and listening to your self-doubt and hiding and not making that pivot, now what has it cost you? And number 5, what one thing can I start doing today? Now, like I shared, I will make sure to put these in the show notes for you to review. These might make you squirm a little bit. I know they did for me. Now, that question that was a doozy for me was number 3. And of course, number 4. But I asked myself what I saw myself doing in 5 years. And literally the answer was so crystal clear, it made my pivot 100 times easier and 1,000 times faster because I knew and saw what my future was. Now, my hope is that these questions helped you as much as they helped me. And just even discussing this topic alone about pivoting and being okay with it, and age is just BS. We can't stop. Now, I'm a big believer of stepping into the room and listening to others who you could learn from, which in reality is everybody. Our experiences are our greatest asset, especially when it comes to our professional growth. And I've had so many setbacks, and I could see now that those setbacks were actually just opportunities for me to gain experience so that I could pivot towards what my future holds. And this goes for you too. If you've been through seasons of pivots, if you have done or not made a pivot, now is your time to look back at those experiences, ask yourself some of these questions, and see if it's time for you to make a pivot as well. Jamie shared this as well, is that we are all going through seasons and that we might see something as a setback once. Once we get through it, we can actually see that it was a set up for our next greatest self. So as we close up here again, I just want to say thank you so much for everyone listening in, sharing, and reviewing. Truly means the world to me. Don't forget to tune in every week, twice a week, and share your favorite episodes on social media and tag me.